When a young child makes a phone call in the dead of night, the last thing anyone expects is a single whispered word that changes everything. What begins as a routine emergency dispatch takes a chilling turn when the voice on the other end belongs to a little girl, trapped in a place no child should ever be. The revelations that follow expose a darkness festering in the very institutions meant to protect the innocent, and the fight for justice will test one woman's courage, forcing her to confront her own grief and sacrifice everything she thought she knew. Before we dive in, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you believe no secret should ever remain buried, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories that dare to reveal the truth. At 1:37 a.m., the dispatch center was quiet, save for the soft hum of computers and the distant murmur of radio chatter. Rachel Monroe, a veteran 911 dispatcher with over a decade of experience, sipped lukewarm coffee to stave off drowsiness. She did her best to keep her mind clear, ready for anything that might come through. The photo of her late daughter was pinned to the side of her monitor, a silent reminder of why she had taken this job in the first place: to help others, to save families from enduring pain like hers. She was exhausted but determined. Months of restless nights had taken their toll, and she could feel tension creeping across her shoulders. Still, she forced herself to remain steady, aware that a single missed detail could cost a life. When the phone rang, she didn't think much of it at first. Calls trickled in every night, noise complaints, minor disturbances, or sometimes a real emergency. She reached for the headset, pressed the flashing green light, and spoke in the calm, measured tone she'd developed over the years. 911, what's your emergency? Silence hung in the line, thick and unsettling. She double-checked her screen, verifying the call was connected. Hello, she pressed, scanning for background noise. She heard a ragged breath, almost too soft to discern. Can you speak up? I'm here to help. If you can't talk, tap the phone or... There it was, another shaky breath. And then, in a trembling voice that sounded far too small, a single word, alone. It was barely a whisper, but it sent a chill coursing through Rachel's spine. She leaned forward, pulse quickening. Sweetheart, she said gently, are you in danger? Where are you? The system's location data showed an address, a place she recognized but hadn't thought of for years. 15 Lawson Street, an old Victorian house that had served as a foster home before being decommissioned. It was dark, boarded up, and supposedly uninhabited. Confusion and dread twisted in her gut. Honey, she tried again, is someone hurting you? Can you tell me your name? But all she heard was heavy breathing, laced with what sounded like muffled sobs. She typed the address into her dispatch software, requesting immediate police presence. A child alone in an abandoned house at this hour? Something was terribly wrong. She repeated her questions, voice soft but urgent. Can you tell me what's happening? Are you safe? But before she could say more, the line went dead. A shudder ran through her. She'd handled countless calls, but there was something uniquely disturbing about this. An unseen child, obviously terrified, alone at a location that was supposed to be empty. Rachel wasted no time dispatching 2 patrol units to the property, ensuring paramedics stood by. Even as she tried to remain professional, an unshakable tension coiled inside her. She remembered how her own daughter had once called for help that never arrived in time. The memory threatened to break her focus, but she had learned to push personal anguish aside. Minutes later, the responding officer crackled over the radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 42. We're on scene. Looks like the place is boarded up. We see signs of forced entry on the side door. Officer, do you see any sign of a child? Rachel asked. She waited, her heart thudding. The officer's voice returned, low and sober. There's a child inside. She looks malnourished and frightened. We're calling for an ambulance, over. Relief mingled with horror. Rachel pressed her lips together, bracing herself. Copy that. Stay safe. The hush of the dispatch center intensified. Other operators cast sidelong glances, curiosity piqued. Rachel forced her breathing to remain steady as she awaited further updates. Finally, the officer reported that the little girl had been found curled up in a corner with a ragged stuffed bunny. She was barely conscious, her clothes dirty, her body trembling from what looked like severe neglect. And in a twist that none of them could have anticipated, preliminary records said she had died a year ago. The strangeness of it made the hairs on Rachel's arms stand on end. In the swirl of subsequent calls, the paramedics rushed the child, whose name was Emily, to the nearest hospital. Rachel felt compelled to go there after her shift. She had a sinking feeling that if she simply went home and tried to sleep, the child's whisper would haunt her. Alone. The desperation in that single word wouldn't allow her to rest. Within an hour, she'd clocked out, grabbed her car keys, and driven through dimly lit streets to Memorial General Hospital. The nurse at the front desk recognized Rachel from numerous prior visits and let her pass into the pediatric wing. The overhead fluorescents hummed. The hallway smelled like antiseptic, and muffled coughs echoed from behind closed curtains. Rachel's steps were brisk but cautious, her heart pounded with anxious curiosity. Eventually, she found Emily's room. A security officer lingered outside the door, speaking with a doctor in hushed tones. When Rachel peered in, she saw a pale, frail child lying in bed, and 4 taped to her arm. Her hair was matted, skin clammy, and bandages covered multiple bruises. The stuffed bunny rested near her pillow, as though it were an extension of her. One look at the child's sunken eyes caused a deep ache in Rachel's chest, a potent mixture of compassion and maternal longing. She hadn't felt such a fierce desire to protect someone in years. Not since she had lost her own daughter. Emily stirred, seemingly sensing another presence. She turned her head slowly, her gaze timid. Rachel offered a soft smile. "Hi there," she said, stepping in. "I'm Rachel. I took your call earlier." Emily's lips quivered, but she didn't speak. Her eyes flicked around, uncertain. The nurse by her side gave Rachel an acknowledging nod. "She's stable," the nurse murmured. "But traumatized. We're trying to figure out what's going on with her records, too." Rachel drew closer to the bed, carefully so as not to startle the girl. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." For a while, Emily just stared. Then, in a voice so fragile it was barely audible, she whispered, "They'd come back." A chill washed over Rachel. "Who?" she asked gently. Emily clammed up immediately, tears pooling in her eyes. She shook her head, clutching the bunny closer. "You don't have to tell me now," Rachel reassured her, though the alarm bells were already ringing in her mind. Emily had survived unimaginable neglect, maybe even abuse. Rachel felt a familiar pang of guilt, like she wished she had found this child earlier. If someone out there truly planned to come back for Emily, what would that mean? Rachel only left the hospital in the early hours of morning, unable to shake the memory of Emily's shaky whisper. She found herself thinking, a child's records declared her dead. That couldn't just be a clerical error, could it? But as she tried to piece together a potential explanation, nothing made sense. Who would go to such lengths to conceal a living child? The next day at the station, Rachel placed a call to Detective Mark Evans, a longtime policeman known for his no-nonsense approach. She arranged to meet him in the break room, prepared to share what she knew. Evans arrived a bit late, rummaging in his pocket for spare change to buy a coffee from the ancient vending machine. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with streaks of gray at his temples and a perpetual hint of skepticism etched into his features. "Morning, Monroe," he greeted, half a yawn in his voice. "Heard you wanted to talk about that kid found in the old Lawson property. Doctors say she's lucky to be alive. You got something on your mind about it?" Rachel launched in. "I read the preliminary hospital documents. They say her official records list her as deceased from an illness last year. This is no small error, Mark. How is that possible? And she's traumatized. She was terrified last night, saying someone would come back for her." Evans shrugged in a manner that set Rachel's teeth on edge. Probably some bureaucratic fiasco. Paperwork in the foster system gets messed up all the time. "I'll look into it, sure, but let's not jump to conspiracies. I've got bigger fish to fry, you know how it is." The dismissive response riled Rachel. A child is found in an abandoned house, nearly starved, and on paper she's been dead a year. That's not just a mix-up. There's a reason her records say that. Evans studied her a moment, then sighed. "Look, I'm not trying to downplay the seriousness, But these situations are rarely as complex as you'd think. Let me do a routine check. I'll keep you updated if something real comes up. Rachel nodded tightly, though her gut told her this was more than a random foster system glitch. Thanks, she said, hoping her tone conveyed that she wasn't giving up so easily. Over the next several days, Rachel found herself drawn deeper into Emily's case. She visited the hospital whenever her schedule allowed. Emily remained mostly quiet, but the nurses said she sometimes woke from nightmares, screaming for help. One evening, Rachel brought colored pencils and a sketch pad, hoping it might help Emily express herself. She sat on the chair by Emily's bed, quietly encouraging her to draw whatever she liked. For a while, Emily hesitated, scribbling random shapes. Then her small, trembling hand produced images that chilled Rachel. A house with broken windows and a tall figure standing over a cluster of smaller figures, children, presumably. Next to them, there was a symbol like a door or gate, scribbled black as though it led into some unknown darkness. Rachel's chest constricted with alarm and heartbreak. She saw the world Emily had endured, and it wasn't a place any child should know. "It's okay," Rachel said gently, when Emily's eyes welled with tears. "You can draw anything you feel. No one will hurt you now. I promise." Emily pressed her lips together, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't want them to take me again," she whispered. Rachel leaned in. "No one's taking you anywhere you don't want to go." Emily's fear was so palpable that Rachel could almost taste it. She knew, without a doubt, that something very sinister had been happening. A child doesn't end up in an abandoned foster home, recorded as deceased, by accident. There were people behind this. She resolved to push harder, even if that meant stepping beyond her usual role as a dispatcher. To glean more information, Rachel revisited the records. She used every channel she had, contacting social services, old colleagues, hospital clerks. It wasn't exactly legal or standard procedure for a dispatcher to do private investigations, but she couldn't help it. The more she dug, the more she found anomalies. Emily had been placed in multiple foster settings over 2 years, each time under a slightly different name. The files were contradictory. Some said she was an orphan with no known relatives, others implied she'd been removed from an abusive household, but gave no details. Each time, new records popped up, followed by a quick closure or a mention of the child's death. Rachel grew increasingly frustrated. At one point, she reached out to Detective Evans again. "Mark, there are multiple references to Emily being transferred to new homes under different aliases. That's not normal. Doesn't that sound suspicious to you?" Evans sighed. "It's definitely irregular. I'm not denying that. But we need official channels to investigate, not just your personal hunches." She wanted to snap back, but she held her tongue. The last thing she needed was to alienate one of the few detectives who might help. Instead, she kept gathering data, forming her own timeline of Emily's placements. Each time, the system lost track of her. Each time, some official sign-off occurred, allowing her transfer. One name appeared repeatedly on the documents: Malcolm Foster, a judge known for championing children's welfare and presiding over juvenile cases. Rachel recognized him from local news segments and community events. She'd always respected him. Could he be mixed up in this? One afternoon, Rachel was in the break room, staring at Emily's file on her phone. She scrolled through the repeated references to Judge Foster, each signed order or note overshadowed by a whiff of secrecy. She nearly dropped her phone when a voice startled her from behind. "Daydreaming again, Monroe?" She spun around. It was Tony Hernandez, a dispatcher she'd worked with for years. "Sorry," she said with a sheepish grin. "Just caught up in something." "You still poking around that mystery kid? The rumor mill says you're obsessed." Tony's tone was playful but concerned. "I get it, you know. I remember what happened with your daughter." Rachel stiffened, a wave of grief swirling in her chest. She forced a calm expression. "It's not about me. This child might be in real danger. Others could be too." Tony shrugged. "Hey, do your thing. Just don't let it eat you alive." She flashed him a tight smile. "Thanks for the heads up." But it was already eating her alive. She spent nights awake, sorting through documents, her mind churning with possibilities. Memories of her daughter's accident bled into the thoughts of Emily's plight, fueling a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in ages. She had to keep going. A break came unexpectedly. A social worker named Marlene, who had handled some of the questionable transfers, reached out discreetly. They met in a quiet cafe, well away from the station. Marlene looked worn, as though burdened by secrets. She stirred her coffee restlessly. Rachel sensed tension in the woman's posture, the way her gaze darted around. "Thank you for meeting me," Rachel said, keeping her voice low. "I know this isn't exactly standard procedure." Marlene exhaled shakily. "I've seen so many cases of children bouncing around the system. It's heartbreaking." But Emily's file stood out. The repeated name changes, the sealed court orders. I tried to ask questions. I was told in no uncertain terms to back off. Rachel leaned in. "Told by who?" Marlene's eyes flicked away. "Not directly. But I got a message from my supervisor that certain powerful people were behind these decisions, and if I valued my job, I'd drop it. We rely on Judge Foster's recommendations for a lot of funding, you see. He's always been lauded as a champion of child welfare, but some of his actions, they don't add up. It's like he has a second face nobody wants to see." Rachel's mind raced. "So, you suspect Foster's involvement in something illegal?" Marlene nodded slightly, pressing her lips together. "I can't prove anything. But it's not just Emily. There are other children who disappeared from the system. Their files indicate they died, but I never saw the bodies, never saw official death certificates, never heard a single detail about funerals. It's as if these kids were erased." Rachel's stomach twisted. "Do you think they're alive somewhere?" Marlene's eyes shone with faint tears. "I can't say, but I suspect they might be trafficked." Her voice trembled on that last word. "Children slip through the cracks. If you have the right connections, it wouldn't be so hard to sell them off, especially if the paperwork says they died. Who would look for them then?" Rachel felt her heart rate spike. The notion was too horrifying to process, but it fit the pattern. Emily said, "They said they'd come back for the others. That means there are more kids." Marlene nodded. "Yes. And if that's true, I don't know how deep this goes. Foster is just one piece of the puzzle, I suspect. But he might be the linchpin." Rachel took a shaky breath. "I need evidence. Solid proof that this is happening. Otherwise, nobody will believe it. Detective Evans is on the fence, and without official backup, it's my word against that of a respected judge." Marlene slid a folder across the table. "This is all I've got. Copies of a few documents, adoption forms, suspicious medical records, transfer orders with Foster's signature. It's not enough for a conviction, but it might lead you to the right places." Rachel opened the folder. Her throat went dry as she skimmed the pages. There were repeated patterns of children, some as young as 3, who had brief stints in foster homes, only to be declared deceased within months. The cause of death was often a vague illness or accident. One set of documents carried the same caretaker's name, a caretaker who apparently died herself 3 times over in separate records. It was a labyrinth of forgeries, or so it seemed. And each time, Malcolm Foster's name hovered in the background, signing off on the legal side. "Thank you," Rachel breathed. "This is a start." Marlene nodded, eyes filled with guilt. "I wish I could do more, but I'm afraid. If they find out I gave these to you, I'll lose my job. Possibly worse." Rachel squeezed her hand, a surge of gratitude and sorrow washing over her. "I promise I'll be careful." That night, Rachel hunched over her dining table, cross-referencing the folder's contents with what she had gathered. She outlined a flowchart of each child's path, scrawling names, addresses, and notes. She discovered recurring references to certain group homes, some closed, some still operational. The deeper she looked, the clearer it became that a well-oiled machine was erasing children from official existence. While she worked, a storm raged outside, thunder cracking the sky. Rain hammered her windows. The power flickered once, and she froze, anxiety needling her. She was alone in her small apartment, surrounded by half-eaten takeout, documents, and the ghost of her own grief. She couldn't help but feel that she, too, might be swallowed up if she tugged on the wrong strings. Her phone buzzed. It was Tony, asking if she was okay. "I'm good," she lied, forcing a steady tone. He tried to coax her to a get-together with coworkers, but she declined. She couldn't rest, not until she found a path forward. Morning came all too soon, and with it, a renewed determination. She arranged another meeting with Detective Evans, presenting the documents from Marlene. Evans frowned as he flipped through them, leaning back in his chair in a cramped office. "This is serious," he muttered, glancing at Rachel with a newfound gravity. "If these files are legitimate, then we might have a ring of child trafficking, and Foster's up to his neck in it." Rachel nodded, relief flooding her. "I knew you'd see it once you had proof." Evans exhaled, rubbing his temples. "But we have to be careful. Foster's powerful, well-connected. If we poke around without a solid plan, word could get back to him, and he'd bury this. Or bury us." Rachel's pulse quickened. "So what do we do?" "We build a case quietly," Evans said, lips pressed into a grim line. "We can't let the department handle this through normal channels. If corruption runs high, it may compromise the entire investigation. We need an ally in the DA's office or maybe even the state attorney general, someone not in Foster's pocket." Rachel felt a flicker of hope. Finally, someone was taking her seriously. "I'll keep digging for more. You handle your side." Evans nodded. "We do this right, we can save those kids. If we slip up, we might never see them again." The days that followed were a blur of clandestine meetings, record searches, and uneasy tension. Rachel balanced her job as a dispatcher with her amateur detective work, and each new shift behind the console felt more surreal. She answered mundane calls, guided paramedics to accident scenes, then rushed home to dissect every scrap of data she could find about the mysterious caretaker names and addresses on file. She lost sleep, skipping meals, fueled by the memory of Emily's trembling face. Emily's condition improved, but her emotional scars ran deep. Rachel visited whenever possible, bringing small toys or picture books. Emily slowly warmed up, allowing a little conversation. One afternoon, Rachel found her gazing out the window. The sunlit corridor outside Emily's room revealed bustling nurses and visitors. Emily's face bore a mix of longing and fear. Rachel approached softly. "Hey, Emily," she said. "How are you feeling today?" Emily shrugged, hugging the stuffed bunny. She glanced over, eyes reflecting the question she dared not voice. "Will they find me?" "It's okay," Rachel assured, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "We're working on making sure no one bad can touch you again. I promise." Emily pressed her lips tight. "They said, if I told, they'd hurt the others." Rachel's heart clenched. "I know, sweetheart. But we can protect you. We can protect them." She paused, trying not to push too hard. "Do you remember any other kids from the house, or from wherever they took you?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "A boy named Daniel. He was smaller than me, but older, I think. He couldn't talk, and they got mad at him for crying." Rachel swallowed hard. She made a mental note of the name, though she wasn't sure if it was real or an alias. Her phone buzzed, drawing her attention away. Detective Evans had texted, "Meet me in the parking lot, urgent." Reluctant to leave Emily, she squeezed the girl's hand and hurried out. She found Evans leaning against his car, brow furrowed. "We need to talk," he said. "Turns out the local chain of foster homes is interlinked with a private foundation that Judge Foster set up 3 years ago." Rachel's pulse quickened. "A foundation?" Evans nodded. "Yeah. Hope for Tomorrow, a philanthropic trust that claims to support underprivileged kids. Their finances are murky, and guess who's one of the biggest donors? Councilman Davis, among others. This could go high, Rachel. Really high." Her gut twisted. "So that means it's not just Foster. He has influential backers." Evans scanned the parking lot, as if worried about eavesdroppers. "We might be dealing with a well-organized ring. They funnel kids through legitimate channels, forging documents so it appears the kids died, then they traffic them. If that's the case, we have to strike carefully." Rachel's mind reeled. Emily's case, horrifying as it was, could be just one piece in a massive puzzle. That night, Rachel's nightmares took on a feverish intensity, fueled by an image of children crying out, locked in hidden rooms, while men in suits and robes signed papers declaring them deceased. In the coming weeks, Evans managed to secure the interest of a state investigator named Linda Moreno, a tough, no-nonsense prosecutor with a reputation for tackling corruption. Rachel sat in on a hush-hush meeting in an unmarked office downtown. Moreno listened intently as Rachel recounted the 911 call and how she found Emily. Evans shared the documents obtained from Marlene. Moreno flipped through the files, her jaw tightening. If this is real, it's one of the worst child trafficking operations I've ever seen. Are there more solid leads? Evans hesitated. We have partial evidence. We need more. We're hoping to find a direct link, communication, financial records, confessions. Moreno nodded. I'll do what I can. But if Foster senses we're onto him, he'll bury the evidence or intimidate witnesses. We have to be strategic. Rachel's eyes flicked to the floor. She thought of Emily, of the unknown children still out there. The responsibility weighed heavily on her. I'll keep digging. I'll talk to social workers, follow the paper trails. If we find something that ties Foster directly to a second facility or addresses where these kids might be held. Moreno met her gaze. We'll raid them. But we need probable cause. Keep me in the loop, Ms. Monroe. A gnawing worry tugged at Rachel's mind. If word reached Foster, Emily would be in danger. She arranged for increased security around Emily's hospital room, even paying a friend off duty to watch the corridor some evenings. She couldn't shake the feeling that watchful eyes lingered behind every corner. One afternoon, as she was leaving the station, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street, engine running. She glimpsed a figure inside, but couldn't make out a face. Her nerves prickled. The next day, her mailbox had been shoved open and rummaged through, though nothing was taken. It was enough to rattle her. She confided in Evans, who insisted they were stepping on someone's toes. Be careful, Rachel, he warned. These aren't petty criminals. They won't hesitate to silence you. Still, she pressed on, returning to 15 Lawson Street to gather any evidence police might have missed. It was a decrepit structure with rotting wooden steps and dusty windows. The interior reeked of mildew. Graffiti stained the walls, signs of squatters. But as she moved through the rooms, she found subtle clues. A child's footprints in a dusty corner, an old sleeping bag. A battered notebook with a few scribbles that seemed like practice signatures, like someone was training a child to write a new name. She snapped photos, heart pounding. At one point, she heard a noise from the second floor. She froze, adrenaline surging. But when she crept upstairs, no one was there, only a flickering light from a broken skylight. Paranoia or not, she felt certain she was being watched. She hurried out, trembling. Part of her recognized how reckless it was to investigate alone. Another part insisted this was the only way to save those kids. She couldn't abandon them to a system that had already declared them dead. Later that night, in a fever of half-sleepless obsession, she compiled her findings and sent them to Evans. We need to track whoever used that building recently, she wrote. At work, the tension was palpable. Tony and other dispatchers asked if everything was okay. She gave half-hearted assurances. But her coworkers weren't blind. They saw the worry lines etch deeper into her features. She had lost weight, lived on caffeine, and stared at documents or her phone whenever she wasn't handling 911 calls. One evening, a nurse from Memorial General called, sounding agitated. Rachel, Emily's asking for you. She's upset. Alarmed, Rachel rushed to the hospital. She found Emily curled in bed, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. The nurse explained that two men in suits had come by, claiming they were from Child Protective Services, wanting to speak to Emily. They hadn't shown official IDs, and the nurse, suspicious, turned them away. Emily was now terrified, saying, "They came back. They found me." Rachel rubbed Emily's back soothingly. "You're safe here. No one can take you against your will." Emily sniffled, gripping her bunny. "They said they'd take me to a new home. But I don't want to go. I want to stay here." Rachel felt rage simmer at the thought that men connected to the ring were already trying to reclaim Emily. She informed Evans, who insisted on placing a uniformed guard at the hospital. The next day, he secured a protective order preventing any transfers without a judge's hearing, conveniently blocking Foster from whisking Emily away under legal pretenses. But the irony wasn't lost on Rachel. They were using the system to fight a man who had twisted it beyond recognition. The following weeks saw a mounting storm of revelations. Evans uncovered a separate building on the outskirts of the city, a rundown compound with high fences, rumored to be a youth rehabilitation center that had closed years ago. The property was purchased by a shell corporation with ties to Foster's foundation. Preliminary rumors suggested children might be held there, off the grid. Rachel and Evans scrambled to gather enough evidence for a search warrant. Meanwhile, they learned that a hearing was scheduled. Judge Foster himself was presiding over a matter related to Emily's official status. Word had it that he intended to assert that her record was final, that any child named Emily was simply an imposter or victim of identity confusion. The plan, presumably, was to bury the real story. The audacity left Rachel furious. He wants to forcibly remove Emily from hospital care and place her somewhere else, Rachel fumed to Evans. And if that happens, we may never see her again. Evans gave a grim nod. We'll fight it. But we need the public to see the truth. Once the community realizes a well-known judge might be involved in child trafficking, the backlash will force action. Nerves frayed at the edges. Rachel sensed that time was running out. She pressed the state investigator Linda Moreno to expedite the search warrant for the compound. Moreno tried, but pushback from certain officials slowed the process. I'm hitting brick walls, she admitted to Rachel over the phone. The judge's allies are everywhere, calling in favors. In a desperate move, Rachel decided to confront Foster indirectly. She attended a public fundraiser for child welfare. The irony wasn't lost on her. Foster was the keynote speaker. In the crowded hall, filled with polite applause and donors sipping wine, Judge Foster took the podium. He was tall, elegant, with a resonant voice that projected moral authority. He spoke of protecting our children, the most vulnerable among us, and the crowd ate it up. Rachel stood at the back, fists clenched. She felt ill, hearing him spout hollow virtues while her mind played through the horror stories of missing kids. She spotted a couple of men watching her closely, possibly the same men who tried to see Emily. She tried to remain inconspicuous, though her heart hammered. After the speech, the crowd milled about. Rachel inched closer, determined to at least look him in the eye. She managed to slip near Foster as he chatted with well-dressed patrons. He noticed her, or rather, recognized her, since they'd seen each other at a previous city event. He offered a courteous, if somewhat haughty, nod. Ms. Monroe, isn't it? You're the dispatcher who found that poor girl at Lawson Street. His tone was polished, but undercurrents of tension lurked. I heard about that. Tragic. I do hope she receives the help she needs. Rachel forced a tight smile. She's improving. Thank you for your concern. He studied her for a moment, sipping his wine. I understand her records are complicated. We must be certain of her identity before proceeding with any official placements. Rachel's stomach churned. The subtext was clear. He was threatening to reassert control of Emily's fate. There's no confusion about her identity, she said, voice steady. She's Emily. I've seen the paperwork, and the contradictions are clear. Hopefully, the truth will come to light soon. Foster's eyes flickered. Truth, he echoed as though the word amused him. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Sometimes, Ms. Monroe, well-intentioned individuals chase illusions, endangering themselves and others. I trust you'll rely on proper channels rather than rumor and sensationalism. The warning in his tone was unmistakable. Rachel's pulse thundered in her ears. She mustered courage to respond, I don't traffic in rumors, Your Honor. I deal in facts. And I don't frighten easily. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. I see. Well, we all serve the best interest of the children. Good evening to you. She watched as he left, a throng of admirers trailing him. She realized her hands were shaking. The encounter confirmed her worst fears. Foster knew she was a threat, and he was letting her know that he wasn't intimidated by her or by Evans's preliminary inquiries. She texted Evans immediately, confronted Foster. "He basically threatened me." The tension only escalated from there. Over the coming days, Rachel's car was followed. Her phone beeped with unknown calls that disconnected whenever she answered. She confided in Tony, who insisted she stay at a friend's place for safety. Instead, she doubled down on preparation for the upcoming hearing. Moreno managed to secure a partial search warrant for the compound. The plan was to conduct the raid just before the hearing, hoping to find evidence that would blow the case wide open. Rachel barely slept the night before the operation. She replayed every angle in her mind, imagining a scenario where they found no kids at the compound, or worse, that the kids had been moved. She thought about Emily's trembling lips, the nightmares that still haunted the girl. She recalled her own daughter's face, how helpless she'd felt the day of that fatal accident. This time, she wouldn't fail. She wouldn't lose another child. Finally, the day arrived. Under the cover of early dawn, Detective Evans led a small team of trusted officers to the compound. Rachel, though not technically part of law enforcement, had insisted on going. She waited in a car near the perimeter, heart drumming as the team cut through a chain on the locked gate. The facility looked ominous, high fences topped with rusted barbed wire, windows boarded up. A sign read "Restricted Access," though it bore no official insignia. Evans's voice crackled through a radio, "All units, go." They swept through the yard, weapons drawn. Rachel slipped out of the car, trailing behind carefully. Shots weren't fired, but she heard officers shouting commands. She approached the main building, adrenaline surging. Then, a breakthrough. From inside, echoing through the corridors, came the faint cries of children. Her chest clenched as officers kicked open a metal door. Within minutes, they discovered 4 children in a locked wing, thin, pale, eyes wide with terror. The sight of them was heartbreaking. Each child recoiled from the officers, too conditioned to trust. One boy clutched a rag doll. Another wore tattered pajamas. Officers quickly comforted them, calling for paramedics. Rachel pressed a hand over her mouth, tears stinging her eyes. This was proof. These kids had been stashed here, presumably waiting to be sold or moved. Farther down the hall, they found documents, folders labeled with numbers instead of names. It included medical records, notes about compliance, references to new identities. Rachel's stomach lurched. It was a blatant pipeline for trafficking. Evans's voice wavered as he spoke into his radio. "We've got multiple child victims on site. This is bigger than we thought. We need more backup." Rachel's phone buzzed with a message from Linda Moreno. "Judge just tried to force the hearing early. Delay him. We're coming with the kids as evidence. They plan to break everything wide open in the courthouse, expose Foster publicly. If he was behind the network, they'd confront him on his own turf." Rachel quickly arranged for the rescued children to receive immediate medical care. She overheard one boy mention he had a sister somewhere else, fueling a new wave of urgency. The ring might still have more kids hidden away, but at least they had enough to tear down the operation. The hours that followed were a whirlwind. The children were transported to a safe facility. Officers combed the compound for incriminating evidence. Meanwhile, Rachel and Evans, along with Moreno, rushed to the courthouse. They arrived to find a chaotic scene. The hearing had begun without them, orchestrated by Foster to finalize Emily's supposed ineligibility for continued care. In essence, he was about to rule that Emily was not who she said she was and should be remanded to an undisclosed, special placement. Rachel's fury boiled over. She marched into the courtroom, heart pounding. Her eyes darted across the polished floors, landing on Emily, looking tiny and frightened, flanked by a court-appointed guardian. Across the aisle, Judge Foster sat at the bench, robes immaculate, face calm. The room was half full of spectators, social workers, and a few suits that Rachel recognized as Foster's associates. She locked eyes with Emily, who broke into tears upon seeing her. Detective Evans strode to the front, raising his voice. "Your Honor, we have new evidence that must be introduced immediately." Foster's expression faltered for a millisecond. "Detective Evans, this is highly irregular. We're in the middle of a hearing. You can't just barge in." Linda Moreno stepped forward, flashing her credentials. "As a representative of the State Attorney General's office, I'm petitioning this court to halt any ruling until the new evidence is presented. It pertains to child endangerment and trafficking, directly connected to the foster care records under discussion." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Foster's hand tightened on his gavel. "This is an outrageous disruption," he said, voice edged with anger. "I trust we're all professionals here." But Moreno was unyielding. "We have 4 rescued children from a facility funded by your philanthropic trust, Your Honor. They bear evidence of captivity, neglect, and forging of official documents. This child, Emily, was presumably slated for a similar fate." Genuine shock filled the room. Foster's associates exchanged nervous glances. Rachel watched him carefully. He clenched his jaw. I have no knowledge of such activities," he stammered, attempting to mask his rising panic. "If there's any wrongdoing, it's by those who manipulated the foundation behind my back." Evans stepped closer to the bench, brandishing files. "We have documents showing your signature on numerous transfer orders, Judge Foster. We have emails between you and certain care providers discussing how to dispose of children who wouldn't fetch a high price." Rachel's throat constricted at the horror of that statement. She glimpsed Emily, who was shaking like a leaf. The crowd stirred, some gasping, others murmuring. The tension was electric, a high-stakes standoff between the corrupt judge and a wave of righteous fury. Foster attempted to regain composure. "These accusations are nonsense. I see no official chain of custody for these so-called files. This is a witch hunt. I demand to speak with my counsel." Linda Moreno refused to relent. "The children themselves will testify, along with multiple witnesses. We also have a caretaker who's willing to come forward, stating you personally arranged for children to be declared dead on paper, so they could be trafficked without any legal trace." Pandemonium loomed. Foster slammed his gavel, but it was a hollow gesture. He glared at Rachel, voice low and venomous. "You're behind this, aren't you?" Rachel met his gaze, unwavering. "This is about the kids." Officers entered the courtroom, having been summoned by Evans. The bailiff approached Foster with regretful eyes. "Your Honor, I'm afraid I have to ask you to come with us for questioning." Foster rose, shaking in rage. "This is an affront to justice. I have dedicated my life." Moreno cut him off. "No more illusions. You're under investigation for child trafficking, conspiracy, corruption, and more. We're booking you today." A hush fell as they placed him under arrest. Rachel exhaled, knees threatening to buckle from relief. Emily's tear-filled eyes locked on her. Rachel walked over, gathering the child in a gentle embrace. "It's going to be okay now," she whispered. For the first time, Emily responded with a fragile hug. "Thank you," she whimpered, burying her face in Rachel's shoulder. The aftermath was swift and loud. News outlets swarmed the courthouse. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Foster was paraded out in handcuffs, his stoic mask cracking under the weight of scandal. In the following days, a massive investigation consumed city officials. Allies of Foster scrambled to distance themselves, while Child Protective Services underwent a top-to-bottom audit. Detective Evans found vindication. His initial reluctance was replaced by unstoppable resolve once he recognized the scope of the conspiracy. Linda Moreno led the prosecution, building a case that extended beyond Foster. She targeted council members and wealthy donors complicit in the ring. The city reeled, stunned that such malevolence had been hiding behind philanthropic facades. Rachel, exhausted and emotionally drained, kept her focus on the rescued children, especially Emily. Medical care and therapy were arranged. Emily was terrified at first that her nightmare would resume. But each day that passed without men in suits showing up to snatch her away slowly rebuilt her trust. She formed a quiet bond with Rachel, one that transcended the typical dispatch-rescued child dynamic. When the time came for the formal trial, Rachel sat in the front row with Emily by her side. The prosecution laid out damning evidence: falsified death certificates, bank transfers from Foster's Foundation to suspicious shell companies, caretaker testimonies describing how children were sold to the highest bidder. Some wept as they described the horrors. Foster sat at the defendant's table, his once proud features drawn and ashen. He tried to deny knowledge, but witness after witness dismantled his lies. The day the caretaker from the compound took the stand, describing the night they'd locked those 4 children in basement rooms, the entire courtroom was outraged. Rachel clutched Emily's hand, furious tears stinging her eyes. In the end, the jury delivered a swift guilty verdict. Foster was sentenced to decades in prison, stripped of his judgeship, his reputation in tatters. Other officials and co-conspirators were likewise prosecuted. The ring collapsed. Dozens of children, once lost, emerged from the shadows, receiving the help they so desperately needed. The city breathed a sigh of relief, though the scars were deep. Rachel didn't relish the victory. She found herself in tears after the sentencing, walking the courthouse steps, thinking of her own daughter. If she had been able to save her child, the way she helped save Emily. She wondered if that would have eased her guilt sooner. But at least she had given Emily a new chance. And not just Emily, the countless other kids that might have disappeared forever, had that 911 call gone unanswered. A small ceremony recognized Rachel's bravery. The mayor offered her a commendation, praising her for tenacity in exposing corruption. She accepted it with a shy nod, standing beside Detective Evans and Linda Moreno. Yet the highlight for her was seeing Emily, who had been placed with a genuinely caring foster family that intended to adopt her. The child stood in the crowd, cradling that stuffed bunny, smiling tentatively whenever Rachel glanced her way. For Rachel, the months that followed were a whirlwind of emotional processing. She continued working at Dispatch, though she used her newfound prominence to advocate for reforms in child protective services. She gave interviews, urging the community to remain vigilant, to never assume that official records always reflect the truth. People listened. Changes were implemented. Some, not enough, but it was a start. One evening, months after the trial, Rachel sat at her kitchen table, flipping through photos. She paused on a shot of Emily at the hospital, eyes still haunted, but alive. Then another, taken more recently, showed Emily grinning in a new dress, standing with her soon-to-be adoptive parents. In the latter, she looked like a normal, healthy child, free of the horrors that once defined her world. Rachel heard a small voice in her mind, her daughter's memory urging her to find peace. She set the photo down gently, breathing out. "We did it," she whispered into the empty room. Emily's new family invited Rachel to a quiet picnic in a local park. She arrived, bringing a small gift. Emily ran up, hugging Rachel's waist, a far cry from the timid child who once cowered in a hospital bed. "Can we play on the swings?" Emily asked, eyes bright. Rachel laughed softly. "Of course." They strolled to the playground, the afternoon sun drenching the grass in gold. Emily soared on a swing, squealing with delight. Rachel's heart felt full. She glimpsed other families, other children playing. Life went on. The city was healing. She felt a wave of warmth, even though she'd forever carry the memory of her lost daughter. In some intangible way, helping Emily and the others was a step toward wholeness. Afterwards, they sat on a blanket, nibbling on sandwiches. Emily shyly offered Rachel a handmade thank you card, decorated with scribbled hearts and bunnies. Rachel blinked back tears, touched beyond words. "It's for you," Emily said, voice earnest. "Thank you for answering when I called." Rachel wrapped her in a gentle hug. "I'll always answer," she whispered. Time passed, and Emily's adoption was finalized. Rachel attended the family court proceeding. This time, it was presided over by a different judge, an honest one, who smiled as he declared Emily officially part of her new family. Applause filled the small courtroom, tears and laughter blending in a sweet moment of closure. Rachel beamed through her own tears, feeling hope bloom inside her. The city, reeling from the scandal, had begun important reforms. Foster's convictions spurred broad audits that uncovered other questionable adoptions. The system, once compromised, now faced intense scrutiny. New leaders stepped up, determined never to let such evil flourish again. Rachel watched from a distance, content to know she'd played a role in sparking change. Of course, not every child was accounted for. Some remained missing, likely trafficked out of state or beyond. That haunted Rachel. But for every rescued boy or girl, a measure of justice glimmered. Detective Evans continued his crusade, spearheading investigations in coordination with Linda Moreno's office. The cases expanded, arrests multiplied, and Rachel offered whatever help she could, all while fielding 911 calls on her daily shift. One night, about a year after the ordeal, Rachel sat at her dispatch console. The routine calls trickled in: a fender bender, a noise complaint, a medical emergency for an elderly resident. Then a call from a teenage girl who thought she might be in labor. Rachel calmly guided paramedics. She realized that each beep of her console, each frantic voice on the other end, represented a life in crisis. She thought of Emily again, how that single call, alone, had ripped the lid off an unspeakable conspiracy. When the shift ended, Tony walked her to the parking lot, the two sharing an unspoken camaraderie. They parted ways with a wave, each heading home. Rachel stared at the sky for a moment, a swirl of stars. She breathed deeply. The world was still flawed, still brimming with hidden injustices. But at least she knew the difference a single person's determination could make. Before climbing into her car, she checked her phone. There was a text from Emily's adoptive mother. Emily said goodnight to her hero friend. She wanted you to know she's practicing drawing again and can't wait to show you her new artwork. A smile spread across Rachel's face. For a moment, she didn't feel tired at all. The hole in her heart, the one left by her daughter's absence, felt a tiny bit less gaping. The next weekend, Rachel visited Emily's new home, a cozy suburban house with a big yard. Emily proudly displayed her drawings, pictures of a happy family, a bright sun, flowers, and a woman with wavy hair who Emily labeled as Rachel. She'd also drawn some smaller children, presumably representing the kids they'd rescued. Rachel praised her talent and gave her a gentle hug. Over dinner, Emily's parents confided that the little girl still had nightmares sometimes. She asks if the bad people might come back, the mother said, voice catching. We reassure her, but she's still scared. Rachel touched Emily's shoulder. No one is going to hurt you, I promise. Emily nodded, clutching her bunny. I know, she whispered, voice tinged with determination rather than fear. Because if bad people come, you'll stop them. Rachel's eyes stung with emotion. I'll do my best, she said quietly. She thought about how that sentiment extended beyond Emily, how she'd keep fighting for any child threatened by darkness. This was more than a one-time rescue. It was a calling. With Foster gone, the city emerged from the scandal with a battered conscience but a revived sense of vigilance. People demanded accountability in local governance, community activists pressed for deeper oversight of the foster system, and more children were saved from precarious situations. Detective Evans often joked that Rachel should join the force properly, but she preferred the front lines of 911, channeling her empathy into every call. Not all was perfect. The heartbreak of those lost kids who might never be found weighed on Rachel's mind, as did the memory of her daughter. But life pulsed forward with renewed hope. She found herself forging new connections, rebuilding relationships that had frayed. Tony and other co-workers saw her as a changed woman, quieter, but with a fierce light in her eyes. The light of someone who had confronted monstrous injustice and emerged stronger, albeit scarred. Months rolled on. Emily turned 7, celebrating with a small party. Rachel arrived with a carefully chosen present, a new stuffed rabbit, soft and white. Emily squealed happily, hugging it tight beside her old, worn bunny. The child glowed under the love of her adoptive parents, beaming at her birthday cake, friends from school crowding around. Rachel felt tears in the corner of her eyes, remembering how close Emily had come to never having such a moment. That evening, after the guests left, Emily pulled Rachel aside. Will you stay a while? She asked shyly. Rachel smiled. Sure. They sat on the couch, flipping through a photo album the new parents had started. Emily pointed to pictures of herself in the hospital, then with Rachel at the park, then the day they'd visited the courthouse for the adoption. The difference in the child's eyes was breathtaking, a transition from hollow terror to cautious hope and now to genuine joy. Emily leaned her head on Rachel's shoulder. "Do you miss your little girl?" she asked, her voice as gentle as a whisper. Rachel's heart tightened. She'd never hidden the fact that she'd once had a daughter. "Yes, I miss her every day," she said softly. Emily took Rachel's hand. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I'm glad you found me, though. I'm glad you were there." Rachel blinked back tears, hugging Emily gently. "I am too," she managed, voice quaking. "I'm so proud of you." That quiet moment wrapped around them like a warm blanket, a testament to resilience. Rachel realized then that while some wounds never fully heal, they can inspire acts of profound compassion. Each time she saw Emily smile, she felt her daughter's memory guiding her, as if whispering, "You're doing what I couldn't." Eventually, the investigations concluded, the indictments processed, the city adjusted to its new era of transparency. The local government allocated more resources to social services and introduced new checks and balances in the foster system. The scandal was an ugly scar, but out of it grew real reforms that might prevent such atrocities in the future. Rachel continued at her post, though she also began volunteering at a hotline for at-risk children, determined to be that lifeline for anyone in need. Emily's nightmares lessened over time, and the scars on her spirit began to fade. She excelled in school, discovering a passion for drawing. She occasionally visited Rachel at the dispatch center, an arrangement her adoptive parents were comfortable with, wanting Emily to maintain the special bond with the woman who'd saved her life. Emily would sit quietly, coloring while Rachel handled calls. The staff doted on her, bringing snacks and praising her doodles. Each visit reaffirmed how precious second chances could be. Eventually, Linda Moreno reached out, inviting Rachel to speak at a state conference on child welfare. She hesitated, never one for public speaking, but realized it was an opportunity to influence broader policy. Standing at a podium in front of lawmakers, social workers, and law enforcement, Rachel recounted Emily's story, explaining how one phone call changed everything. She described the moral imperative to listen to every plea, to question every suspicious record, and above all, to protect children at all costs. When she finished, a hush lingered in the room. Then applause erupted. People stood, some wiping their eyes. Rachel stepped away, flushed. She felt small under the spotlight, but also satisfied that the story of Alone would inspire others. As she left the stage, Linda Moreno clapped her on the shoulder. "We need more voices like yours," she said with a warm smile. The final pieces of closure came quietly. One crisp morning, Rachel visited the cemetery where her daughter was buried. She knelt by the small headstone, brushed away some leaves, and placed a bouquet of wildflowers. Taking a deep breath, she whispered, "I love you, baby girl. I'm doing better now. I met someone who needed me, and I helped her. I wish I could have helped you too, but—" She paused, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I hope you're proud of me wherever you are." A breeze stirred, rustling the nearby trees. She closed her eyes, letting sorrow and gratitude mix in her heart. The ache would never vanish entirely, but she had found purpose in that pain, forging it into something that saved others. From that day on, Rachel felt a renewed sense of peace. She formed a deeper relationship with Emily's adoptive family, becoming a close friend they could rely on. Sometimes they joked that Rachel was Emily's cool aunt, a role she cherished more than words could express. She continued her job at the dispatch center, answering calls at all hours. Each ring reminded her that someone, somewhere, might need help just as desperately as Emily did. In the end, the city moved forward. Judge Foster rotted in prison, a cautionary tale of how power corrupts. The children once caught in his web of deceit lived on, finding new families or returning to relatives who genuinely cared. The newspapers eventually found new headlines, though the memory of the scandal lingered in the public consciousness. Social services restructured. Laws were tightened. Whistleblowers were encouraged rather than silenced. The difference was tangible. Rachel's own life settled into a steadier rhythm. She found herself smiling more often. Her nightmares dulled. She learned to let go of the crippling guilt she'd carried since losing her daughter. And whenever Emily's voice echoed through the phone or she showed up at the dispatch center with her bright grin, Rachel felt the warmth of a life renewed, proof that even in the darkest corners, a single spark of compassion could kindle hope. And in those fleeting moments, she allowed herself a gentle satisfaction, remembering that night at 1:37 a.m. A whisper in the darkness, alone. That whisper had ignited a fire of truth that tore down an entire criminal network and saved countless children. Rachel believed it was fate or a higher power or something else entirely. But no matter what one called it, the outcome remained. A testament to the power of one phone call and the determination of a woman who refused to let another child slip away. So, if you believe the truth should always come to light, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories that shine a light into the shadows. Thanks for watching.